There are only 6 steps you need to understand to get your fire alarm system approved by the fire department in New York City. Over the past decade, we've installed over 50 fire alarm systems here in New York City, and the common problem I face with customers is them not understanding the 6 steps it takes to get their system approved. So in this video, I'm going to go over the 6 steps to help you understand how you can get your fire alarm system approved here in New York City. The first step you need to understand is the planning phase of your fire alarm project. When it comes to the planning phase, there are 3 steps you need to go through. You need to go through the fire alarm design phase, you need to go through the plan review phase, and you also need to go through the final inspection phase. When it comes to the fire alarm design, you need to have a licensed architect or a licensed professional engineer. They would need is the occupancy type of that classification of the building. What type of business is going to be in this building? Is it going to be medical? Is it going to be mercantile? We need to know what type of classification in order for the fire alarm engineer to design the proper fire alarm system for that particular classification. How you get that? You'll get that through the Schedule A applied by the Department of Buildings. Usually when these buildings first go up, the architect that's usually designing this will actually have some type of classification of what business is going to be in this building, whatever type of business is going to be. A lot of times, let's say if it's mercantile, we're going to be selling some type of product, whether it be clothing or whether it be cell phones. We're going to be a retail store selling things to customers. So the fire alarm will be designed specifically for that particular classification. But if it's, let's say, a medical office where they have backup generators, then that fire alarm system will need to have a little bit more protection for that business. So depending on the classification, depend on how the engineer will design the fire alarm system. After we design the fire alarm system, we have to then fill out a TM1 application. This application is submitted to the fire department along with the fire alarm design, which is actual floor plans of where we're going to put each and every device, fire alarm riser diagram, giving them a 1-line diagram of what's actually going in the building and what floors. The final thing along with supplying the TM1 and a riser diagram is an ACP5. Usually we will have to get an asbestos investigator for them to go out to the building, take samples to see if there's any asbestos in the building or to see if we can or cannot work in any particular area. After the engineer gather up all those documents, the final thing is to pay the fire department filing fees. Whatever those filing fees are is usually generated at the end of the process. Pay those filing fees. The engineer will then submit that paperwork to the fire department. Then the next step after that will be the plan review. Now, during the plan review process, this can take up to 24 weeks. You need to understand that you can actually expedite a job, but usually the fire department is trying to govern every building within the 5 boroughs. So you have one agency handling pretty much every building in the 5 boroughs. So it usually takes them anywhere between 20 to 24 weeks for them to get back to you if it's going to be disapproved or approved. If your drawings are disapproved, then you will have some comments. You will have to make some corrections. Maybe you don't have enough protection. Maybe the wire size was wrong. Whatever the indication is, the plan examiner will tell you what problem is. You make those corrections, then you resubmit your drawings for approval. Now, if your drawings get approved, then the next step after that will then be to get a project authorization. Once you get the project authorization, you are now able to install the fire alarm system. You will now need a licensed electrician and a licensed fire alarm company. Usually the submission of the fire alarm application is usually done by a fire alarm company and the engineer, and they will usually also have the electrician on board ready to go to install the system. Once we get the approved drawings and the project authorization, we are now legally able to do the installation of the fire alarm system, which leads me to my next point, the installation of the fire alarm system. When it comes to the installation of your fire alarm system, you want to have a licensed electrician to install your fire alarm system. They have to tap the main power that's coming in from your building to the fuse disconnect switch in order for that to supply power to the fire alarm system. The electrician will then run all the conduit throughout the space, run all the wiring, and usually either put all the devices or the fire alarm company will come in and install their own devices. But in most cases, the electrician will do complete 100% of the job, install all of the fire alarm devices, wire them up, bring all the wires back into the panel. Then a fire alarm technician will will then come out, test all the cables, make sure the cables are free of grounds, troubles, or any faults like that. And if so, they will work together to fix it so that way the cable can be free and the technician can then hook up all the cables and then program the system so that way he can add the devices that the electrician installed and give them functions so that way if a smoke detector goes off and the elevator needs to recall, we will program those functions into the system. Or if the fans need to shut down, we will program those functions into the system. Whatever functions that need to be designated for those systems, we will program into the system. And once we finish programming them, we will then do 100% test of each and every device to make sure this system works 100%. And the final thing after that, once we install the fire alarm system and ensure that it works, we will then hook up the central station. We will get into an agreement with the owner of either the space or the building so that way we can monitor this fire alarm system. We need an active monitoring account and a fully functional working fire alarm system in addition to all of the paperwork in order to schedule a fire alarm system. Which leads me to my next point, scheduling the fire alarm system inspection. Some of the things you need to understand when it comes to scheduling the fire alarm system inspection. If you have water flows or tampers, if you have elevator shutdown, if you have fan shutdown, stair pressurization, any function that you have within the building, those other trades also need to be present at the pre-test and also at the final test. So that way, when we need to test the water flow, the plumber can then run water for the duration of the time, 45 to 90 seconds, to ensure that the water flow activates within that time frame. Or the elevator mechanic could ensure that the elevator recalls if we have a problem with the relay, the fire alarm relay, or some type of wiring between the two. We can make sure that other trades are there to make sure they could correct any errors if anything rise up at the time of the inspection. So some of the paperwork you need to have is the as-built riser diagrams. What that means is whatever you install, that needs to be put on the as-built riser diagram. If it's 30 smoke detectors, 27 horn strobes, whatever the quantities of those devices that need to be put on the as-built riser diagram, in addition to the sequence of operation, in addition to at the top, it needs to say as-built fire alarm riser diagram. You also need the stamp from your professional engineer or the stamp from your electrical contractor in order to submit those as-built riser diagrams. Along with the as-built riser diagram, you need the A433 form filled out. This gives the fire department how many devices and where they are, what floor, the type of wiring and the type of system you use, who's the central station, the fire alarm company, and the electrical company. It gives them all the information of who had their hands putting in this fire alarm system. In addition to the A433, you will need an active central station, like I said, but you will also need the original contract with the fire alarm company's signature, the customer's signature, and also the monitoring company's signature. Once you have that paperwork, you can then submit that paperwork to the fire department so that way you can schedule an inspection. But you must remember, before you schedule an inspection, you need to make sure your system is fully functional, your riser diagram, your operating instructions are hung up on the wall next to the panel. You have your signs on the panel, either stating fire alarm control panel or the fuse disconnect is located in basement cellar room 101. This is the fuse disconnect for whatever the business is at that space or whatever the builder name is. All of these things need to be in place. The technician need to either have the S98 or the company need to have the S97. You want to make sure if you have heat detectors to have your heat gun present. You want to make sure if you have 2 radios so that way you communicate with the person at the panel and then the electrician in the field. You want to make sure you have a can of smoke or a can of CO. If you're not using the CO 1224s, the push button COs, you want to make sure you have a can of CO. So whatever device you have installed, you will make sure every vendor is there for that. If it's a relay that's connected to a fan, the AC vendor needs to be there. If there's a module that's connected to a sprinkler, the plumber needs to be there. If you have heat detectors, make sure you have heat guns. So all of these things need to be in place, and the technician himself or herself also needs to have their S98 while they're present at the fire inspection for the fire department. So once you have all of these things in place, you should be fine on the next step with passing your fire alarm system. Now, the next point is pre-testing the system. When it comes to scheduling your fire alarm system, it may be scheduled 2 weeks, 6 weeks, or maybe 8 weeks out. So at that present time, you want to schedule a pre-test with all of the vendors to do a live test. So if the plumber needs to run water for 45 or 90 seconds, he needs to do so. If we need to be able to simulate a fan shutdown or an elevator shutdown just to make sure it works, and if there's any malfunctions, the trades can be there to fix it. We need to do a pre-test to make sure everything is working 100%, and you need to verify that each and every signal is received by the central station, whether it be low battery, line 1, line 2. If you're using a communicator, the communicator needs to have a module that's monitoring the communicator. If it's an IP communicator, or rather IP cell communicator, each form of communication needs to be monitored by the fire alarm system, and each form needs to be verified by you and also by the fire inspector when he or she comes out to inspect your fire alarm system. So if you have all of those things in place at your pre-test and you are 100% confident that you would pass this test, this final inspection, the next point is the final inspection. Now, when it comes to the final inspection, the fire inspector is always on time, or usually a half hour early. So you always want to be prepared. You want to have the fire alarm system powered up. You want to have no troubles on the fire alarm system. You want to make sure the system is offline with the central station, and you also want to make sure that system is active with the central station. If you have CO detectors, you want to make sure that they are marked as supervisory on the fire alarm panel, but the fire department will dispatch. If you don't express that with the central station, most times the fire department will not dispatch on the CO. So you have to make that clear to the central station that you need the fire department to be dispatched anytime they get a carbon monoxide signal. So once the fire inspector shows up, he's going to find out who's the fire alarm vendor, who's the electrical vendor. Now he's going to want to start testing the system. Fire alarm vendor she'll perform all the functions of the test that need to be performed for the fire inspector, rather it be disconnecting the batteries, taking off the phone lines, disconnecting circuits, causing troubles, causing alarms, blowing smoke, whatever the fire inspector needs. You are there to perform those functions to demonstrate that this fire alarm system is fully functional and is working. Now, once the fire inspector goes through everything, depending on how the system operates, they will inspect 100% of your system to ensure that every function works and that every signal goes to the central station. And if your system passed, then you will get a letter of recommendation. A letter of recommendation will get you to the next step to get your letter of approval. Then you can file to get your certificate of occupancy, so that way you can open up your business and start making money for your business. If you don't get a letter of recommendation, then you will get a notice of defect. A letter of defect could mean that we may need to add a few more devices, or something didn't work right. Maybe a tamper switch didn't work, needed to be adjusted. He gave you 30 seconds, you didn't adjust it in time. Whatever the case may be, a notice of defect will be defects that you had on your system, or things or items that did not pass, that he or she would have to write down, that you will then have to request another inspection once you answer those defects. And once you answer those defects, you request another inspection. They go over the defects. If the defects pass, then you will get a letter of recommendation. Your next step will then be get your letter of approval, so that way you can get your certificate of occupancy. If you get a violation is very bad. Violation means you don't have central station hooked up. Violation means your fans are not hooked up. Violation means your system is faulty, it has troubles, it is not working. You do not want to request an inspection if you still are installing the system. The system needs to be fully installed, fully tested before you request an inspection. So if you get a violation, you have 30 days to fix that violation. And a violation can be 2 pages, 3 pages, 4 pages, however many pages it is your job to fix that violation within 30 days and then request another inspection against that violation. So you need to avoid these violations by installing your system in a timely manner and making sure that your system is fully functional and connected, active with the central station. So some tips you want to avoid when it comes to making sure you get your fire alarm system approved within these 6 steps is to do a quick Google research to make sure that the fire alarm company you're hiring is, 1, licensed by the New York State, and 2, registered with the fire department. Those 2 attributes are needed in order for a fire alarm company to either install a system, hire an electrician to get the system approved by the fire department. So this has been a video on the 6 steps of how you can get your fire alarm system approved by the New York City Fire Department. If you have any troubles with your fire alarm system, or if you need help with your fire alarm system, let me know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel. I'm Anthony Richardson, and we'll answer any questions you have when it comes to fire alarm system. I'll see you in the next video. Peace.